In this video, we're going to talk about externalities. Markets with externalities fail to generate the efficient outcome. And so what we're going to do in this video is we're going to provide examples of positive externalities and negative externalities, and we're going to show in a supply and demand framework how presence of externalities leads to an inefficient level of production. Now, an externality is some effect on a bystander or a third party who is not engaged in a market transaction. So the bystander or the third party is neither a consumer of the good or a producer of the good, but is in some way affected by consumption or production. These bystanders can be affected positively in the case of a positive externality or negatively in the case of a negative externality. And it doesn't matter if externalities are positive or negative, their presence leads to market inefficiencies. We talked about efficiency in the context of a perfectly competitive market. And we said markets are efficient when marginal benefit is equal to marginal cost. And when we start talking about markets with externalities, we're going to differentiate private benefits and social benefits, private costs and social costs. An efficient outcome occurs when marginal social benefits for everyone, are equal to marginal social costs. Now, if we leave the market to operate on its own in the presence of an inefficiency, we're going to get an outcome that's different than that, that's inefficient. And we're going to show this happening in 4 cases. In markets with positive consumption externalities, negative consumption externalities, positive production externalities, and negative production externalities. Let's start positively with a positive consumption externality. Now, an example of a positive consumption externality is a measles vaccination. If I purchase and consume a measles vaccination, I benefit. I don't get the measles. However, other people that I come in contact with also benefit. I am not a carrier of the measles. I can't transmit the measles to friends and family or anyone around me. So people who are not involved in that transaction receive benefits from my consumption, positive externality. Now, what we have here is, I'm going to zoom in so we can take a good look here, is we have a supply and demand graph for just the market. Since this is we're going to talk about a consumption externality, it doesn't have anything to do with producers. So marginal private cost is going to be the same as marginal social cost. And here our demand curve is marginal private benefit. And this is still true. Demand is equal to marginal private benefit. But in a market with a positive consumption externality, others are positively influenced by my consumption. That means that marginal social benefit is greater than marginal private benefit at all levels of consumption. So we have a new curve that we need to add. This is our marginal social benefit curve. Notice how it's greater than our marginal private benefit curve. The socially efficient equilibrium occurs at the point where marginal social cost is equal to marginal social benefit. And what you'll notice if you look at this picture is at the market outcome, marginal social benefit is greater than marginal social cost. So this market would be more efficient if a higher quantity of this good was consumed. So let's clean this up and take a look. In a market with a positive consumption externality, the socially efficient price and quantity, this quantity right here, is higher than the market outcome. At the market outcome, marginal social benefit exceeds marginal social cost. So in the presence of a consumption externality, this outcome here is inefficient. This good is underconsumed. We would be better for having more. That's a positive consumption externality. Now, let's be negative, and let's think about a negative consumption externality. An example of a negative consumption externality is an individual purchases and consumes and smokes cigarettes in the presence of others. I may be enjoying my cigarette, but one of the consequences is I expose those around me to secondhand smoke, which is not only unpleasant, but has negative health benefits. So the costs and benefits of consumption are not entirely restricted to me. So those who chose not to participate in this market transaction have negative consequences. So what we have here, again, is a standard supply and demand graph. And since this is a consumption externality, marginal private cost and marginal social cost are the same. Now the difference comes from, here we have our marginal private benefit curve. Now, since I am exposing those around me to cigarette smoke, let's zoom in here, and those around me experience negative consequences associated with my consumption, our marginal social benefit at all levels of consumption is less than marginal private benefit. So we can sketch in a line here, and what we've done here is construct our marginal, I'll just abbreviate it, MSB, our marginal social benefit curve. Now, this is our market equilibrium. This is the socially efficient equilibrium. As we can tell that our market equilibrium is inefficient because at market equilibrium, our marginal social cost, right here, exceeds our marginal social benefit. And society would benefit from less of this good being consumed. So our socially efficient price and quantity are lower than our market price and quantity. So let's clean this up and take a look. We have our market outcome. We have our socially efficient outcome. We have at the market outcome, marginal social cost exceeds marginal social benefit. This good is overconsumed. We would be better with less. That's a negative consumption externality. Now let's talk about a positive production externality. Now we're going to the producer side when we're going to be altering marginal social cost and marginal relative to private cost. So an example of a positive production externality, let's say a honey producer sets out beehives near orchards. Now the honey producer sets the bees loose to collect pollen and so forth to create honey, but the orchardists benefit from their trees being pollinated. So the costs that the honeybee producer faces are greater than the costs of these, the cost to society, because we need to account for the reduced costs that our farmers face for pollination services. So what we have here is a supply and demand graph for this market where supply is equal to marginal private costs. These are the costs that the marginal costs that the supplier faces. Now down here we have demand is equal to marginal private benefit, and since there's no consumption externality, this is also social. So marginal private benefit is equal to marginal social benefit. And here is our market equilibrium. However, since the producer of this good, who bears these private costs, by producing this good, reduces costs to other producers, like the orchardists. We need to sketch in a new marginal social cost curve that is lower at all levels of output than private costs. So we're gonna zoom in here and we're gonna draw in our marginal social cost curve. These are the costs of both the honeybee producer and the orchardists. And what we find is our socially efficient equilibrium would occur where marginal social cost is equal to marginal social benefit. And that's some quantity and price that's different than our market outcome. Our quantity is higher and our price is lower. And we can also notice here that at our market outcome, our marginal social benefit exceeds marginal social cost. This value here is higher than this value here. And what that also tells us that the market would be better, or our society in general would be better off with more of this good produced. So let's zoom out here, clean this up, and take a look. Here's our socially efficient outcome. Here's our market outcome. At the market outcome, marginal social benefit exceeds marginal social costs. Our market outcome quantity is too low. We would benefit from more of this good being produced. This good is underproduced by the market. Now let's think negatively. Now let's think of a negative production externality. Let's suppose we have a paper manufacturer that disposes of production waste into a river. Then those costs need to be borne by someone else. Somebody else has to face the cost of a polluted river. So if we were to take a look at our standard supply and demand graph, since this is a production externality, marginal private benefit is equal to marginal social benefit. But our marginal private costs are different than our marginal social costs. At every level of output, social costs are higher. So let's zoom this in and draw ourselves in a new marginal social cost curve. Doesn't matter how much this firm produces, social costs are higher than private costs. So here is our marginal social cost curve. This is our market equilibrium. This is our socially efficient equilibrium. Our socially efficient equilibrium has the firm producing less paper and prices being higher. We can tell that this equilibrium is inefficient. This market equilibrium is inefficient because at market equilibrium, marginal social costs are up here, marginal social benefits are down here, marginal social cost exceeds marginal social benefit. So society would benefit by a reduction in production. Let's clean it up, take a closer look. Here we have a market with a negative production externality. Marginal social costs exceed marginal private costs. At the market equilibrium, we have marginal social cost exceeding marginal social benefit. This tells us the market is overproducing this good. We would be better off in society having less of this good. Here's our socially efficient quantity. Here's our socially efficient price. So let's recap what we have. We can have positive externalities and negative externalities. In any case, we get a socially inefficient outcome. In the case of positive externalities, we see marginal social benefit exceeding marginal social cost, suggesting that the good is either underproduced or underconsumed. In the case of a negative externality, we see marginal social costs exceeding marginal social benefits, suggesting that the good is either overproduced or overconsumed.